Time now for a look at the day's top business news, starting on this Brexit day with a look at what lies ahead for the UK in terms of trade as it exits the European Union. Here to help us do that, Brian Quinn, our business editor.
Well, Will, as these negotiations between the UK and the EU get set starting March 3rd, a key factor will be a system of financial equivalence in which non-EU firms get access to European markets if their home rules are close enough to Europe's own. The US, Australia, and Japan all have equivalent provisions in place. But the system doesn't cover many sectors that the UK is accustomed to having as an EU member. It doesn't cover retail, nor commercial banking, nor a large part of the insurance market. Brexit backers worried that the system could leave the UK a, quote, rule taker, having to abide by EU regulations without having any say in them. Equivalence can also be unilaterally withdrawn by the EU on just 30 days' notice. At over 30 billion euros per year, Europe is the UK's biggest financial services export market and one that bankers are keen to hold on to. Recent comments by the UK Finance Minister Sajid Javid that there would be, quote, no alignment with EU rules post-Brexit have drawn concern from the European side.
If the United Kingdom does want a very close economic trading relationship with the European Union, the degree to which that is consistent with the ability to diverge, because from the point of view of the European Union, a key dimension of the single market is anybody who's in the single market or anybody who's trading with the single market is doing so on the basis of a commonly agreed rulebook.
Well, the EU takes nearly half of all British exports and accounts for millions of jobs. So stakes are high for this new phase of negotiations over the future of trade. But there are, of course, many sticking points. Most of all, the EU wants to ensure that the UK adheres to EU standards. That is unlikely to please Brexiters who wanted Brexit to be a chance for Britain to diverge from EU regulations. Camille Nederlich has the story.
With one set of talks done, another will begin as the EU and UK negotiate what post-Brexit trade will look like. Britain wants a tariff-free, quota-free deal, much like the current agreement. But for that, the EU wants reassurances.
The precondition is that European and British businesses continue to compete on a level playing field. We will certainly not expose our companies to unfair competition.
Unpalatable for Brexit MEPs who campaigned to leave under the slogan "Take Back Control," because the level playing field means the UK could not lower standards to gain a competitive advantage. It would have to mirror the European Union on workers' rights, environmental protections, taxes, state subsidies to businesses, and not undercut the European bloc later on. London insists it won't be a rule taker. And as always, Brussels and Britain are also at odds over Ireland. The EU insists there must be no customs checks on the Irish land border, whereas Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there won't be any at all. Just 11 months remain before the end of the transition period erases the current trade relationship. The PM wants a comprehensive deal signed by year-end, a process that usually takes much longer. The EU says it won't be rushed, and there is a chance that the transition period could be extended by up to 2 years.
Checking in on the markets now. European indexes opening in positive territory as investors keep a close eye on the ongoing coronavirus outbreak. London's FTSE 100 up just slightly at the open. The CAC 40 here in Paris up around 1/3%. Frankfurt DAX not too far behind. Sterling gaining some ground after the Bank of England's decision Thursday to hold rates steady, though analysts warn that any failure in UK-EU trade talks could send the pound sharply lower. It's currently holding at right around $1.3125. Asian indexes mixed as those virus fears continue to weigh. New Chinese manufacturing data, though, beating expectations. That's helping to boost shares in Asia. The Nikkei in Japan ending the day up nearly 1%. Shanghai still closed for the holiday. Hong Kong's Hang Seng down just over 0.4%, with the Kospi in Seoul losing 1 1/3%. And finally, for business, as if things weren't complicated enough for Britain right now, Household goods giant Unilever is considering putting its top tea brands up for sale as more and more young consumers switch to coffee. PG Tips and Lipton up on the block as UK tea consumption has fallen over 9% in the past decade. Tea breaks, a British tradition for some 200 years. Roughly 100 million cups still drunk each day. That's a market worth over £560 million. Sales of black tea, though, down £18 million from just 2 years ago. Is it Brexit related, Will? I don't know.
Yeah, Brexit. I guess it would be replacing it with something stiffer. I don't know. Are you a tea drinker?
I'm not. I'm a coffee drinker.
Yeah, me too. But we're Americans,
The
right?
Irish border, perhaps a little Irish coffee in there.
Ah, okay. All right. Brian Quinn talking about libations for business. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. He'll be back a little bit later with more business news.